Welcome to Taking the Tradition On. Whenever and wherever you are most welcome. We are recording today on the 11th of November 2025, which is, of course, Remembrance Day. We are here for Series 7. And the theme of this series is Archetypes Unlocked. And we've got a rather special theme and a rather special person for the 11th of November Armistice Day. So we will be here for about an hour. It's an Amy hour. It probably will go a little bit over because that's just the way that these things go. It'll be about an hour of conversation and storytelling and discussion. But it's not a story concert as such if you haven't been to one of these before. It's not going to be an hour of storytelling. It's very much getting to know the storyteller that is my guest tonight and discussing a theme. As always, I would like to thank my amazing patrons. Quite a few are here tonight who help make this happen. I am eternally grateful, and I think you're completely, utterly wonderful. So tonight, we are exploring archetypes, quintessential characters that appear over and again in myth and folktale and legend. Characters and symbols that act as a shorthand for our brains to sort of decode the world. And helping me tonight, I'm inviting an internationally acclaimed storyteller, a holder of a rare oral tradition, the Drut'syla tradition, the last known Drut'syla in the world. If you know another one, please tell us, because I'm sure she would like some company. And I would like to introduce to you the utterly fantastic and wonderful Shonaleigh. Good evening, Shonaleigh. How are you?
Well, I'm really good actually. Yes. Thank you for asking.
Well, I'd
That's the
like to.
You're not used to giving me giving you short answers, are you? Or
Not
expecting me
really, no. I mean,
No, I'm fine.
to be fair, we're taking the tradition on. I mean, it's about an hour, and I'm sort of allegedly here as the interviewer because I talk to storytellers. If I'm lucky, I get 3 questions in. So I just sort of wind people up and let them go. So what I haven't announced today is what our theme is, what archetype we are taking in. So Shonaleigh, what archetype have you chosen for tonight?
Wounded warrior.
Which I did nudge you slightly towards, being that it is Armistice Day when we're recording this. And the Wounded Warrior just seems a really appropriate archetype for today. Now, I know what you mean by that. I'm going to say we're not psychologists or psychiatrists here. We're not Jungian or Freudian or anything else. These aren't official necessarily archetypes. These are archetypes that we use as storytellers, that we have that we use kind of as shorthand in myth and legend. So tell me a little bit more about how you see the Wounded Warrior.
Um, well, in the version of a story that I know, he is somebody that starts down one particular path to attain something. And realizes that it is unobtainable. He cannot obtain it. And because of that, he kind of has a little bit of madness, really. And this madness sees him going a bit like a berserker into battle and really kind of losing his mind in the fight. And then having this moment of blaming Adam, as in Adam and Chava, Adam and Eve, and getting pulled up about that and having to take responsibility for the things that he's done um, in order for him to heal himself and move forward. And that's what I like about this particular story. He gets a chance to do that. He's given the choice to do that.
And that isn't always the case, I would say, for this archetype. I mean, the Wounded Warrior, I would say, is that character who sacrifices himself for his ideal, only to discover that then there is no place for him.
Yeah, no place in the
because
world.
he has had to change himself so much to accomplish the ideal that he, there's no room for him. And it's that thing of a warrior who was fighting for peace, that you turn
Mm.
yourself into a warrior, to a fighting machine for a world in which you don't want any fighting machines.
Yeah, there's
And
no place for you in that world that you've brought into being, basically.
yeah, you make yourself obsolete.
Yes. And also you go beyond so that you can never go back. You can't go, right, well, I've done this and I've done this and I've achieved my goal. Now I'll go back. And you see this over and over again in real life as well as story. The soldier that comes home from war and has PTSD and is not equipped for peacetime, because
And
it
there's
changes you.
and that warrior coming home comes up all over the world. I mean, there's certainly the Japanese story of the crescent moon bear, and there's lots of that story all over the world. We were looking for stories of the wounded warrior going, well, it's an archetype, it occurs all over the world, and there are lots and lots of real life examples, and there are stories like the crescent moon bear, and all the stories that we could think of actually all come from a woman's point of view. And there weren't as many stories as we thought they were going to be, because so many stories about warriors, all the places that went, oh yeah, there'll be Beowulf and King Arthur, they're written by men for men, and
Mm.
they're about the glorification of battle and the glorification of war, and they're designed to try and inspire youngsters to go in and join the fight. And I think that maybe you have such a complete version of this story because you come very specifically from a woman's tradition.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, another thing that we were talking about was courage, and bravery. So
No,
bravery
I'm
is
going to ask you to hold that thought because I think that's quite a long conversation.
okay.
And what I would really like, because I think we're sort of talking around this story, we've given a bit of an idea. I know that some people have heard you tell the Wounded Warrior, but there are many who haven't. Would you tell us a little bit
I'll
of
tell you
his
a little
story?
bit. Now, most people know the beginning of this story, but they don't know the end of it. Um, and it's because I think somebody found a version of it many moons ago, but they just found a bit of it. And it did the rounds about 20 years ago as a story called The Black Knight. And I remember hearing it and going, but that's only one third of the story. That's not the whole story. And so the Black Knight, basically, young musician, um, falls in love with the princess, realizes it's a princess. Uh, Somebody says, "Oh, the king's looking for a warrior." So the land is beset with people. Our borders are weak, and so he goes to a hermit, and he asks this hermit, or in the story, he goes to Elijah, and he goes to this guy, and the guy says, "Well, there's going to be a price." He goes, "I don't mind. I'll do anything." He becomes this incredible warrior. Um, Absolutely routs the enemy soundly, and comes back to claim his price, which is the princess that he loves. And he, I don't know what it says in the Black Prince version, but in the Wounded Warrior version, he says, "Madam, will you love me the way I love you?" And she says, "No, I'll marry you because that's the decree, but no, I don't love you." He says, "Why? I love another." "Well, then I'll swedge him. I'll fight him." And she explains who it is, and he realizes it's who he was. So he releases her from her promise, and that's the story that everybody knows, and wanders off and is never seen again. But that's the first third of the story, where and it's told as a love story, but also a story of change, um, and accepting change. Change is inevitable. Change is non-refundable. You can't go back and be who you
Well,
were.
this is, and he starts off as this just optimistic, wide-eyed artist and musician, and he comes back as just cynical murderer, really. I mean, he's a clinical killer.
Well, yeah, he's become this man that, I mean, in the version it's he's known as much for his mercy as well as his justice, and which says, he probably has executed many people on the battlefield. So he's not the person that played this beautiful music, which is what she fell in love with. So that's the bit that everybody knows. But in the version that I was taught as a child, and it goes right back to an Egyptian story. He loses his mind. He's lost this woman that he's done everything to try and gain, and he loses his mind. Not so much because he can't have her, but he realizes he could have had her if he hadn't changed, but he's changed. And the story goes, I haven't got time to tell it. Is it all right if I just mark it?
Well, it would be lovely if you chose a bit that you wanted to tell. I mean,
Okay, well, I'll
so that
tell
we actually
you.
get to experience what, because I think most people here have heard you as a storyteller, but not everybody has. So I think they should get an idea of what Shonaleigh
Okay.
is like as a teller. So tell us a bit. You can mark other bits, but tell us a little bit.
Okay, well, he goes into battle after battle after battle. And um he has this kind of red mist that comes upon him. And at one point he's in the throes of this battle and he brings up his sword, and as he arcs his sword, as it's coming down, he looks and this red mist clears for a moment, and standing there is a mother trying to protect her child. And the weight of his sword is he can't stop the blow, and he scythes this mother and child down, and he is absolutely beside himself that this has happened. And there is a point where he is kneeling in the aftermath, the carnage of this battle. And he says, I will never know peace again. I will never, there is nothing else that I can do in this world. And he almost longs for death in the middle of battle. And then in this state, he conceives an idea. And the idea is it's all the fault of Adam. And he takes a sack from the battlefield and he puts a bone in it. And he decides that he's going to walk the world wide and he is going to gather all of Adam's bones and he's going to burn them, which is the most awful thing you could do, because it would mean that if he manages to find Adam's bones and burn them, then Adam will never be able to, ascend. And he's walking across this shoreline and he sees a woman, but he's mainly muttering to himself. And he's muttering about peace, not peacetime, not an absence of war, but a peace of mind, and that he will never again know peace. But if he can burn Adam's bones, he might have some vengeance that will give him some sort of peace. And there's the woman on the shore is called Abigail. And Abigail is married to the Prince of the Sea, Rahab, and that's more stories than I could tell you. But this one moment where their paths cross, she says, "What are you doing?" And he tells her, and he says, "Can you give me peace?" And she says, "Sit a while, sit a moment." And she builds a fire on the beach, on the shore. And she takes herbs from her pack and she throws the herbs and she says, "I need you to breathe deeply and I need you to promise me you will not question anything you see. You will just accept. And if you can do that, you'll find peace." And he agrees. And so he breathes this smoke deeply. And when he opens his eyes, he's no longer on the shore. He's in the most beautiful landscape and the sun and the grass, and it's just so perfect. And he's just sitting there and he breathes in and he breathes out. And indeed, for the first time in many years, you know, the nightmares hide at the back and he feels a bit of peace. And then he sees two men, and these two men are cutting green branches from a tree and putting them into uh, log bags for a fire. And he watches for a while and he thinks that's not how you do it. You know, a green branch won't burn properly. So he goes up to them and he says, "Excuse me, you're doing it wrong." And they say, "What?" And he says, "You're doing it wrong. You don't want to be cutting the green branches. You want to be cutting the dead wood." And they just look at him and they say, "You're not from here. You don't belong here." And with that, he's back at the fire again. And he looks at her and he says, "I know I shouldn't have asked any questions. Please send me back. It is the most peaceful I've felt in many a long year. Please." And she looks at him and she says, "All right, I'll send you back. But remember, don't ask any questions." And she throws the herbs on the fire and he breathes in the smoke. And when he opens his eyes, there he is again. And he ignores the chopping to his left. And he gets up and he wanders. And it is truly a remarkable place. And then he sees an old man chasing a gazelle. And the old man can hardly walk. And every time the gazelle gets tired, it sits down, and so does the old man. And he thinks that is the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen. And then the gazelle will get up and run a bit and sit down, and the old man sits down. And in the end, he calls out, "Old man, you'll never catch it that way. When the gazelle sits, that's when you run." And the old man just looks at him really sadly and shakes his head and says, "This is not the place for you." And with that, he's back on the beach. And again, he begs Abigail a third time, and she puts the herbs in the fire and she says, "This is your last chance." And when he's back there, he ignores the chopping of the wood and he sees in the distance the old man and the gazelle, and he ignores them and he turns to his right and he starts to walk towards the city. And it's as you get close to the city, usually there is this smell of humanity. And it's not, it smells amazing. And he doesn't hear all those angry voices. There's just laughter and it feels the most peaceful place. He's so excited. And then he sees two men with a great millstone between them. And they're trying to roll it over the the bridge into the courtyard. But they're both pulling it. They're either side of it and they're both pulling it. Or they'll stop and they'll both push it. So of course it's not getting anywhere. And he looks and he thinks no, and he walks straight past them. And then he hears them grunt and he can't stop himself. He goes back. And before he's even given them two words of advice about how to move this thing, he's back on the shore. And he looks with red rimmed eyes at Abigail and says, "Please." And she says, "No." She says, "No. But you see, you're blaming Adam. And he only fell once. But you fell 3 times. Because you see, the wood that they were gathering wasn't for a fire. Those were the new souls that were to be born. And the old man and the gazelle, that's youth and old age, and they should never catch up with each other. And that millstone, well, that's time. No man can move time to his own will. You have to stop assuming you know how to fix everything." And they have a long talk, and he said, "It's all right, I'll put down my sack and I won't go for Adam's bones, but will you give me peace? And she says, I will. And she gives him a pearl. And then the story goes on, and basically she promises him that he'll have one last battle, and in that battle he'll finally know peace. He takes it that he'll die, and so he walks because there is no place in the world that will accept him. And he comes to these outlying lands where there is this village that is being plundered for the harvest every year. And he fights for them. And he fights like a berserker. He fights with everything he's got to defend these people in this village. And he wins. And it's virtually just him. But he gets a mortal wound. And he's like, oh, thank goodness. Now I'll just go. I've paid my debt. There'll be some kind of peace. And as he's lying on the battlefield, he feels that he feels teeth round his ankle, and he's dragged off the battlefield. And the long and the short of it is he doesn't die. He's been dragged off the battlefield by this huge hunt, by this huge hound, and that hound is actually First Dog, who's been looking for a master, and they tend each other. And the dog gets in trouble. He rescues the dog and he heal. And he goes on to have a second life as the most respected gem merchant in the world, because only he can deal with these amazing gems and stones and feel no greed for them. And then the story continues a bit, but that's basically the whole story in a nutshell.
Yeah, it's quite a long story to put in a nutshell. It's a great story though, Shonaleigh. It is a really fantastic story
Mm.
and just perfect in so many ways. You know, kind of the fact that that he does have to heal himself, but he can't
Yes.
do it alone.
Yeah.
And
And I love
actually,
the fact that he's given a dog, and that dog has got his own sets of problems. But a dog doesn't judge you by what you've done in the past. This dog just sees somebody that needs help, drags him off the battlefield so he doesn't get kind of finished off, and licks his wounds and heals him. And so when the dog is captured for stealing pies to feed him in a time of famine, and they're going to slaughter, they put the dog on trial and they're going to kill the dog, he gives the only thing that he's got, which is this pearl that Abigail's given him, which in Jury represents sorrow. He gives this pearl to buy this dog's freedom because it's the only thing that hasn't judged him. And given him the space to heal himself.
and that's the thing. Animals live in the present,
Mm,
and I mean, there's been so much work now on how important animals are in healing and the things that they can do for us as humans in so many different ways that I don't think they've always been given credit for really in the past. But this is a very old story, and it's something that we know instinctively. There might be loads and loads of studies done on it now, but I think it is something that we've always known that animals have that power to heal, and they can create that space in the moment and also give you a reason for living because you have to be responsible for another
mm,
soul, another being, but a being that doesn't ask questions of you in the same way that maybe another human
yeah.
would.
It does makes no moral judgments about you whatsoever.
And obviously, I
Um,
mean, and I love that it's a pearl because I think not just in Judaism, pearls stand for tears. I think in lots of other circumstances and cultures they do as well. But the other thing, obviously, that pearls are vastly known for and always represent is wisdom.
yeah.
And so the two together, yeah.
And something beautiful born out of irritation as well.
Yeah.
This thing that is born out of trial that is absolutely beautiful.
Well, I think that's why they're pearls of wisdom, isn't it? Because it is that thing if you take the grit and you take the irritation and you work at it and you worry it and you polish it and you polish it up, and it's our trials that make us wise. So,
Yes.
I mean, I
Yeah.
assume that's why pearls are associated with wisdom, because it is about making something shining and something beautiful out of
Mm.
hard work and annoyance.
Yeah.
Um, and again, it just I love that it is a woman's story, and the dog is really essential. But then it is through a woman that he starts to come back into civilization, and he does. I don't
Yeah.
want to give any spoilers, but obviously he does get married, and he does manage to actually come to
Yeah.
a point where he can hold a relationship and he can hold
Yeah.
an equal partnership.
He doesn't want to ever forget that moment where he was prepared to just die, let it all go, and he was brought back. So when he becomes this gem merchant, he has a ruby collar made for his dog. And this woman who's on, it's a completely different storyline, but they merge at this point, and she's come to him because um, she wants his help to release her father because the king doesn't believe that there's a dog with a ruby collar and so she says to him, why have you given him a ruby collar? And he says, so people will ask, why have you given him a ruby collar? And I can tell the story, and in the telling of the tale is some healing from it. And he tells her the whole story. And she says, "Will you come and tell that to the king and get my father released?" And he literally does. And what's really lovely is, and they end up getting married. And he's older than her, but she's wiser slightly. I think she's more worldly wise because she's had to be quite streetwise. And I love that he gets that chance to and gem merchants, they're really in the world, but not of the world as well. So he gets the chance to settle um, because you would never, ever pick a fight with him. There's just something about him. If he says that's the price he's going to give you, then you know that's a fair price.
Yeah, he's definitely not someone you want to pick a fight with. Really, really not somebody you want to pick a fight with.
Um,
Though I imagine it would take it quite a lot to get him to fight.
I don't see, yeah, there is no record of him ever getting in another fight at all, ever.
It doesn't need to.
No, he doesn't need to. Yeah, we were actually going past. Oh gosh, where was it? It was an abbey, and we were talking about how many of the Crusaders came back from battle and just couldn't fit into life after that, so they became monks and things. And I was thinking, I wonder if that's where they got the idea for Cadfael, whoever wrote Cadfael. You know, this
Ellis
monk.
Peters.
Yes, this monk who has become a that was a warrior that had a past that they found hard to kind of align with, as we were saying earlier, the life you're expected to live on your return.
I think you're right. I think there was a large tradition of warriors becoming monks, of warriors, who just weren't fit to have relationships, certainly, and weren't kind of found it very difficult to fit into society.
Mm.
And that's how, there's so many stories about people coming back from war, the First World War, the Second World War, and how they managed to fit in. And that's, the one of the greatest tragedies of war. The You spend all of that time fighting and of longing to get home, and so many stories have that bit where they get home and that's the happily ever after, and actually
Yeah,
that's where the real difficulty starts, and all of those mad romances where everybody sees in the moment, because you don't know when, if tomorrow might be your last day. You don't know when death is coming, and you have to seize what happiness you can. And then 3, 4, 5, 6 years later, you're coming together and people have had such different experiences. How do you make that work? How do you reconcile those? And I think, people who had dogs, great plan. And
yeah.
children, I think, made a lot of difference as well. Though not all the children had a great time while they were fixing things.
Well, yeah, there's another story, the warrior with the glass heart, which is in the previous cycle as well. And it's very much, he comes home and he knows that he's not right. He knows that he can't communicate, but he doesn't know what's wrong. And he goes to this person and says, "Well, actually, what you've got is a glass heart, and you need to fix that." Um, yeah.
Absolutely. Well, do you know, Eden is absolutely thinking along the lines of me. So, and this is where I was going to go with the next question as well. Eden's saying, do you think that the uniqueness of this version of the Wounded Warrior, male main character, but with women's influence and with a longer, more complete story, is also because of Jewish history as well as the Drut'syla tradition? I'm thinking of Jewish men in Europe and perhaps elsewhere being forced into the armies of countries where they lived but were not true citizens.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I think, being forced for something to fight for something you don't entirely want. I mean, there are many jokes about that. The two young Jewish men that are absolutely crack shots. So they're put in the army, and they don't want to go in the army, but they're put in the army, and then their commander when they're in the height of battle goes and says, why aren't you shooting? And they say, well, are you insane? There's people in the way. Um, and I mean, it is a joke, but there's an element of truth about it. Um, and I think, but I think that applies. I mean, it's a very complete story because with the tradition, with song and story rather than commentary, it's been in the mouths and the minds and the hearts, and been told by women for many, many, many sort of hundreds of years, I guess. So it has been shaped by those experiences. It's been shaped by all of the things that people have had to live through, and that's not just the Jewish people. That's anyone that's been diaspored, anyone that's been forced to pick up your home and move somewhere else. Anyone that's wondered about what the next day is going to bring. I mean, we were talking earlier. I remember my father, or my Zeta, actually, was bomb disposal in the war. That's what he did. Um, and his job on D-Day was to ride a Norton 500 onto the beach under heavy fire and defuse anti-personnel mines. I mean, it's amazing he survived. And he used to talk about that. He would talk about that a lot. The thing that he never talked about was, and I found it in his diary, was when he had to shoot somebody. And he shot somebody. And then, and they weren't much older than him. And he found their um, pictures of their wife and their children. And that is the thing that he couldn't deal with. He could deal with all the danger because he said you didn't really think about it at the time. You were terrified, but you couldn't afford to in that moment. But that was something, and that I think gave rise to what I think is real heroics, which is when you're terrified, but you still do it. He never wanted to pull his gun on anyone and kill them ever again. It really, yeah, it had a deep impact. So one of the things he was reconnaissance corps, that was a family story that he used to tell actually, was he would go ahead for reconnaissance, and he was on his motorbike and he drove into this clearing, and there were four German soldiers just had a camp, and he'd driven right into the middle on his own on a motorbike. And he didn't want to have to shoot anyone. So he had the gift of the gab. My Zeta was Sephardi, and he had the gift of the gab, and he convinced them that the English had advanced and he was the rear coming up, and they were now many miles behind English lines. But he would escort them back where they would be given proper treatment. So he had them running in front of the motorbike with his gun and sort of taking them all through the forest so they lost sense of the direction and brought them back as prisoners, because the last thing he wanted to do was get in a gunfight. He just, not because he was scared, but because it had really traumatized him so much that first time. So I think that was an immense act of bravery that was accomplished because of fear, but not fear for oneself, but yeah, the situation.
Well, we were starting to. I stopped you earlier from talking about courage and bravery, and I mean, I think it is about what you're willing to sacrifice, and there's a big difference between being willing to sacrifice your own life
Mm.
and being willing to take a life. And yeah, those are different conversations to have with your conscience and your um what and different types of courage.
Yes, yeah. And I think the idea that these stories, there is nothing glorious about war. Nothing glorious. And we were talking earlier, and I think a lot of the Arthurian stuff really does glorify fighting. And one of the things that I learned through this story that we're talking about and through others is actually it's very easy when you're frightened to hit out, to lash out. The hardest thing to do is have a conversation. The
Having a
hardest,
conversation is dangerous.
yes, very, very dangerous. It is much easier to shout abuse. It is much easier to blame the other. It is much easier to go, oh well, it's all their fault, them and the immigrants and this and that, and take on all of these things so that there is somebody to blame. Because when you're afraid, it's much easier to do that,
It's
and to hit
easy to have
somebody.
things to be black and white and them and us, and then you can bolster yourself up. You can gather your mates around you and go, well, we're the good guys and we're the people in the right, and then it's so much easier for your conscience, and then you can get away with almost anything if you can persuade yourself that you are on the side of right and all you and all your mates are good and everybody over there is bad. Then you can blow them all to smithereens with a clear conscience, and they don't kill you, and it's easy. But
Yeah.
it's, you know, seeing all the complexity, seeing people on the other side as people.
I remember when I was younger, there was a war going on, the Croatian War, it was, and it was the first, because I was quite young, the first major conflict that I'd ever really seen via media, if you like, and it was interesting. You know, I hadn't actually connected it with people. And there was a moment where there were these two youngsters trying to get across no man's land, if you like, and they got shot. And I don't know who the news journalist was that was responsible, because they didn't want to show that shot, but he wanted it shown. And I remember I was still at school seeing it, and it was for the first time, because it wasn't just mass destruction. It was two people about my own age that had lost their lives because, you know,
Somebody was scared.
privileged, sorry, but usually men were having a row about something. I mean, in an odd way, I think, you know, when the kings had to go to war, at least they had to fight. That doesn't apply now, you know. I think you should put them both in a room and let them fight it out amongst themselves, because it's the little people in the middle. And that brings me on to, Simon did a piece called
Out of the silence.
Thank you, Out of the Silence, which was about conscientious objecting and what the conscientious objectors went through physically. And it was absolutely horrendous. And it was an amazing piece. And he was asked to do it in a school. Correct me if I'm wrong, Simon. He was asked to do it in a school, and he he did it for these school children. And then the teacher was like, "So, I don't think I could go and fight," and literally glorified war again. The minute, I don't think I'd be uh, brave enough to go and fight. And it was like, have you not heard anything that we've been talking about? Have you not heard anything?
So it's Simon
It,
Hayward that we're talking about. Simon Hayward's piece.
yes,
Simon, yeah. Unmute yourself. Yeah.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
yeah. It wasn't actually Out of the Silence. It was a story about some lads from the local area near the school who had actually gone out in the local PALS regiment and died, within the space of about 10 minutes on the 1st of July 1916. And and the school wanted something to do for kind of local history, but there was no dressing up the fact that their names are on the war memorial. So I had to tell the story of how these lads all went out and got killed. And it was a bit of a moment, really. I couldn't think of a way of dressing it. I tried to dress it up as best I could, but I don't think the school did. And the school were a little bit like, wasn't that brave? And it was, well, don't think they really thought that one through necessarily.
No, I mean it's one of those. I'm wearing a white poppy. It's really interesting. If you wear a white poppy, people want to know why. They
Mm,
don't want to know why if you wear a red poppy. I mean, and I have got a red one as well, and I think it takes a very specific. I mean, like so, Shonaleigh was talking about the conscientious objectors. It takes a very specific and massive type of courage to be able to stand up and go, I am not going to kill anybody else, and kind of, I will support you. I will go into danger. I will fight for what I believe in verbally. I will stand up and volunteer to be shot down, and sort of and the Quaker movement now, which is very much associated with the conscience objectors, lead a lot of peaceful talks and to go into terrifying situations, to deliver help, to deliver support, to try and start conversations when you are not armed is a much more courageous thing in my mind than to stand up with a load of mates armed to the teeth. And nowadays you don't even need to necessarily stand up to be in that situation. I think we're getting so divorced from war, it's getting easier and easier to kill people with drones, with machine guns, with everything. You don't have to look somebody in the eye
no,
to be able to
it's
kill
like a
them.
video game.
It's absolutely a video game, and it's like so. You were talking about your Zeta and your dad. I mean, like so. This is my year. I'm very grateful to the Imperial War Museum. He recorded my granddad's memories of his war, because it's one of those things again. One of the things I love in the Wounded Warrior, and particularly your version of the Wounded Warrior, is about talking
Mm,
and about the healing power of the talking. That he has this dog with the ruby collar, so that he has to tell the story. And so many people who came back and who come back now cannot talk about their experiences.
mm,
And so they don't ever entirely move on. They don't ever find that peace. There is always a fragile um, glass heart at the center of them because they haven't been able to talk. And talking is very difficult, remembering, but also calling to peace. But reading this through, it's one of those things that the bits that really there's some very heartbreaking moments in it, but one of the first bits that really brought me to tears was him describing going into France and the first time he saw dead German bodies and kind of how the machine guns had destroyed the bodies and kind of unzipped them, and just how shocking that was to him to have actually to see somebody killed in that way. And that was the moment that his war really began, I think.
mm.
And I don't want to force anybody to see those dreadful images, but at the same time, if you're going to cause that kind of damage, you need to understand and you need to know what you're doing. And
Yeah.
it's the people who give the orders don't have that connection with the reality of what's happening.
And it's not nice to talk about it. Let's not talk about it. If we don't talk about it, then it'll all go away. And it's Yeah, there's so many that would never talk about it when they came home. And
I
as I
mean, it's
say, anything my Zeta talked about was he made things funny, but there were certain areas he never, ever, ever talked about. Same with my Bubba. She never talked about her war, ever, ever talked about it. Anything I ever got from her was always secondhand or things that she said in an unguarded moment. You know, she had no ear here from here to here, no ear. And I asked her about it one day when I was small, and she went, "Oh, a doggy bit it off," and she said it just like that, and it made it sound so sweet. A doggy bit it off, and it wasn't a doggy; it was a an SS guard dog that had been released on her and torn her ear off, and I only found that out from somebody else, but she wouldn't talk about it either.
it doesn't surprise me. I mean, this is the thing is I'm very grateful that somebody else recorded my granddad. I mean, I recorded a lot. I've done a lot of reminiscence in my time. I've recorded a lot of memories. I've talked to a lot of people about their wars, but it's really hard to talk to your family about it.
Mm,
And you don't tell your grandchildren
no.
about war. I mean, like you just wouldn't. It's not that, you don't talk to your nearest and dearest and children about it.
I
Um,
remember putting the Fool of the Warsaw Ghetto together, actually, which is a fairy story from Auschwitz. And I was, it was put together through snippets from Bubba's diary and different things. And I always remember somebody seeing it on a program somewhere. I went, "Oh no, I don't want to see that. I think that would depress me terribly." And this idea that let's not engage with this because it'll never actually touch me or anything like that.
I know.
And it,
Well, I think the things that we've been seeing in the world lately is that nobody's safe, and you don't know what's around the corner. You don't know what's coming.
mm. But if we
Erin
can
is
talk and if we can create dialogues, you know, there's a thing, isn't there? People go, "Oh, storytelling will change the world," and it won't. Storytelling will not change the world. If it was going to change the world would already have changed. But what it can do with all of these stories, with the people that engage with storytelling, is if it's done in a certain way, it can create spaces where the difficult questions can be asked, where people can feel that they can ask difficult questions and hear difficult answers. And maybe if we have that dialogue, there'll be less wounded warriors and more justice and more peace. Because we never hear about when peace breaks out, do we? Only war.
I know, but it also, what I think is such a major role of stories is to shine a light as well, to give the possibility of hope. And I think
Yeah.
storytelling can really do that. It can bring hope into dark places.
Outrageous hope.
I mean, and Erin, and we're going back a little bit, but I mean, it absolutely fits in with what we're saying. Erin's saying there are video games that were created to create the desire to join the army, and that's how I kind of feel about a lot of the Arthurian stuff, really.
Yeah.
I mean, there's definitely story. I mean, like a lot of the Arthurian stories were specifically written to celebrate patrons, kind of knights, and to big up people that have been, there was a whole thing about, getting people to write stories about you and your families, to big up families and to big up knights, and to try and rally the troops.
Yes, well, it's the battle cry, isn't it? The bardic battle cry. Let's hear about brave Sir whoever. And I'm sure that's why Python did the opposite. That they took the piss out of it. The whole Arthurian sort of mythology. No disrespect for people or my husband who is an Arthurian scholar, but yeah, they do. It's like a whole PR campaign, isn't it? The Arthurian stuff. And they don't act particularly nobly at
No, no,
all.
I mean, like, your husband's very close at hand. What I will say is that is all true. On the other hand, it was worse before the Knights came, and it was, to be fair, it was a very specific point in time where Britain, was in what was so called the Dark Ages, that point where there wasn't any central government, when it was this whole thing of kind of might is right, and the idea behind the knights was that they would be a voice for the little person, and that they would
Mm,
try and keep some sort of semblance of order, and that people wouldn't be squished under the greatest boot that happened to be around to tread on them.
mm.
Um, Whether
I
they
think
were
that's
always the
it.
shining examples of chivalry that they were meant to be
Mm.
is a slightly
I,
different kettle
I
of fish.
I had a thought about the warlord, with the eye of stone, him. And he has a very different kind of ending to the Wounded Warrior, where he is given countless chances to kind of step back from this major power trip. And he has been so mangled. He's got a bronze arm, he's got an iron tongue, he's got an eye of stone. There's very little humanity left with him. And it's only when Ben Thebes tells him a story, but it's like he's gone so far down that route that the only thing that can happen is for the ground to swallow him up. That's the only release he gets
Mm.
because he's gone too far. He's lost too much of himself.
Which again, I think happens all
Mm.
too often. But that is the beautiful thing in the Wounded Warrior, and your version it is there is a window for hope and a way not to go back to who he was, but there is a way forward. There is a possibility of a life beyond, of creating something new, of creating peace, um, and of using the experience that he's had to make a better world.
Yes.
Um, I knew this would happen. I knew talking to you, the time would just fly by. But I did promise people that there would be chance for a Q&A. And I did also warn you that this was an Amy hour, which is a little bit flexible. So, so this is your chance. If you have questions that we haven't answered that you burningly want to ask, stick them up on the chat now. Um, so, Erin's saying the Lakota would not choose a man or woman to be a warrior if they could not grieve or have compassion for what they're about to do. I wonder if we went far enough back in European or UK history, there was a lifestyle like that. I think you'd have to go quite a long way back.
I think you would. It's interesting that in Jury, a warrior rides a horse, but a king rides a mule or a donkey. A warrior, you would never get a king on a mule or a donkey or somebody that was perceived to be a good king. You wouldn't have them on a horse because that a horse means they're a warrior, they're untested, and someone that is used to fighting and has not tempered that with humility, hasn't tempered that with kind of uh, diplomacy and democracy, isn't fit to be king.
I'm just going to say you have sort of described the heart of Christianity in that.
Yeah, well, it sort of suddenly
The
has
king riding on the
Jesus,
donkey.
yeah, coming in on a donkey. I mean, he was making a political statement there.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah,
That was
completely.
a political statement.
Massively. I don't think that was ever disputed. That
Mm.
the donkey is massively a massive
The
symbol in
animal of
there.
kings, yeah.
Yeah, completely. Um, Eden saying this valorous aspect is what I was thinking of with my question about Jewish history. Same brutal actions, but no valor ascribed or claimed, and that the absence of any glory leaves space for a more true story. I
Say
mean,
again?
she's saying the same brutal actions, but no valor ascribed or claimed, and that the absence of any glory leaves space for a more true story.
Yes, I agree with her on that one.
Even though, I mean, I'm sure that his actions were glorified, and it does start off. I mean, he saves the kingdom. I mean, the kingdom is under threat when he goes
Yeah,
to
he
rescue the
saves
princess.
it
He does save the kingdom.
at terrific cost to himself
Yeah.
and spends the rest of his life kind of coming to terms with that, really.
Uh, Erin's asking, are there any female warriors in your cycles, and what makes them different from male warriors? Erin found one via Xenga who gave food and help to people not fighting and was considered a warrior.
Yeah, there's Judith. who takes the head of Holofernes and is treated very differently than someone like Joshua.
Yes, she absolutely is treated very, very differently, and she's very much pushed into being a hero and not given a huge
Yeah,
amount of choice.
she's given no choice and she has to use her sexuality because she doesn't have brute strength. And when she finally does, yeah, jail as well with a tent peg and a mallet. Yeah. Never underestimate the power of a tent peg and a mallet. But yeah, when she takes his head and she comes back, yeah, she's treated very, very differently that because she's murdered. I mean, she's done exactly what they wanted her to do, but if she had been a man, she would have been fated.
Whereas she is expected to atone for
Yeah,
forevermore.
for atone for doing that.
Catherine's
Um,
saying, yeah, she's sadly reminded of Emmeline's Pankhurst support for the White Feather movement in World War One. Wondered if there are any other female characters in stories who reflect that. I mean,
yeah, I when I started working with Simon on Out of the Silence, I was really shocked about that.
yeah,
That she supported the white feather movement. And for those, I'm sure, yeah, yeah, they went straight to the top rather than battling. They absolutely did, didn't they? Yeah. Which I think must have taken enormous nerves of steel, really. Um, but yeah, Pankhurst, why did she do that, Simon?
Why did she do it? I think she believed it. I think she was genuinely sincere in her support for the war. I think some of the suffragettes were politically also as well. It was a way for them to demonstrate that they were responsible citizens who deserved the vote. You know, if they
Yeah.
supported more effort,
So it was
they
a political rather than a moral
well,
decision.
it might have been both.
might have
Yeah.
both. Yeah,
So
I
I
honestly
Esther
mean, I
don't know.
think
says,
to have the
what?
strength to, I mean, when there's a huge movement like that and the whole country is
Mm,
becoming very, very patriotic and the whole zeitgeist is towards kind of that you're doing it for the right reason and this is the right
yeah.
thing, it's quite tricky to resist that.
But also, there was a spread of political opinion within the
Yeah.
suffragette movement. I mean, all
I
they had
just
in
want to
common was
explain what the White Feather Movement was because there's a few people that don't know. So basically, you had what they call conscientious objectors, people that would not fight. Some would go as ambulance men and women and nurses, and some would just work on the fields and not actually engage in any way. And they were called conscientious objectors. They objected to the war, they refused to fight, and but also there were some soldiers that came home absolutely traumatized, didn't want to go back to the battlefield. And what happened was you would give them a white feather, and that signified cowardice. And so if you were white feathered, and it became a terrible thing. And you often had girls who just decided they didn't want to marry their fiance. And so they wanted him to go back, so they'd pin a white feather on him. They'd go in the pub and pin a white feather on him, and Emily Pankhurst supported it.
And I mean, the other thing about the whole white feather movement, I mean, it's quite often, I mean, it was such huge amount of peer pressure, but the women didn't necessarily know always. You know, they'd have a load of white feather. They'd be just, walking down the street. They wouldn't know the men that they were white feathering, and there's so many reasons. So people, lots of men were rejected from joining up for
Or
medical
they were in
service.
reserve professions like coal miners. They needed the coal. If you worked in a profession that was essential to the war effort, if you were or if you looked younger, but you were actually too old to be drafted, and they would just white feather you. And
And the other way
the
round, kind of
shame.
the amount of boys who joined up who lied about their age, and you might get, 16-year-olds and 15-year-olds who are being white feathered because they maybe looked a bit older, but actually they weren't old enough to go and went anyway. There's an
Yeah.
awful lot of boys lied about their age and they didn't really ask them too closely.
No, no, they really didn't.
Erin's missing the connection to all of this. What, from the Wounded Warrior? You mean we have gone quite away from the Wounded Warrior, and yet not really, because
No, I don't think we have.
there's lots of different ways of being wounded, and the Wounded Warrior does do it for love. He does it for pressure. He does it to save the kingdom. He does it because he believes it's the right thing to do. He makes an enormous personal sacrifice, um, and in doing so, changes who he is, and so that he cannot return to the world that he knew before. And the reason that he sacrifices it, which is usually for love in the first place, he makes this enormous sacrifice, and he can't claim the reward.
Yeah, I agree, Fred. Soldiers are not warriors, they're just victims. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
The comment about the suffragettes. All right. Well, I think it was the fact that the suffragettes, because you think they're campaigning for women's rights, they're having all of those hard conversations that people didn't want to have. And in the middle of all this, they decide that young men that don't go to war are cowards, and they white feather them.
But then there was a whole thing of they weren't allowed to go to war, and they were fighting to have equal rights. So there's a certain amount of seeing, men who can go to war when they believe it's the right thing to do, and they're not allowed to go. Um, I mean, yeah, as Simon
Maybe
says, there's
it's
a whole range of political opinion within the suffragettes, and also, as he was rightly saying, wanting to be seen as full citizens with a voice and people who were ready to vote.
yeah. And they were going through their own kind of battles as well.
Yeah.
But yes,
Right, so Erin, it wasn't all suffragettes that were white feathering, but Emmeline Pankhurst, who was, a major voice in the movement, was.
very pro it, and yeah, probably a political decision to, as Simon says as well, to be seen as sensible, upright citizens that supported the war. Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. The men who didn't do their duty were allowed to vote, while the suffragettes couldn't.
yeah, and I think makes me cranky. Well, it's happened. It's worth knowing and it's worth learning and moving on, like the Wounded Warrior, isn't it? It's like you can't let those things define you. It's worth having those conversations. I
And
like
it is,
Fred's thing about soldiers are victims too. They're
and
not.
and all of society, when war comes, everybody in society is a victim. It's and I think it's very hard to judge people in that situation when there's this whole enormous powerhouse machinery kind of driving the war and trying to influence public opinion. I think it's sometimes unfair to judge people from your own time looking back and go, no, well, I wouldn't have done that. And it's just like, well, I always, I mean, it's, I would like to think that in certain situations I would have done the right thing, that I would have done the heroic thing, that I would have
But you just don't know,
called
do
out with
you?
my voice. And I might well have been caught up with the zeitgeist. I can't guarantee, I can't honestly look at myself and know that I would have done anything different. All we can do is hopefully look back and go, that's what I wish I would have done. And I'm going to take that and
Yeah.
I'm going to try and do that now.
I think also you've got people like their arguments very cut and dried. They're like goodies and baddies. And actually, it's never that simple. It's never that simple. It's you remember when you'd little and you'd walk in on a movie and my mum did it, towards the end of her life when she'd got dementia. Who are the goodies? Who are the baddies? So you knew who to root for. And it's not that simple. And it's never going to be that simple.
And that is the beauty of the archetype of the wounded warrior, is that it strips all of that simplicity away. I'm really sorry, can you hear that? There's a random thing going off in the corner of my room. The wounded warrior,
Is that your bag book thing?
that is my bag books thing that I put away. I've been working with people with sensory needs. I've got sensory stories, and there's this little thing going ding ding ding. The 1000th shopper has just walked through the door. Sorry.
Random.
Very random. Sorry about that. I was trying to make an important solemn point there. It's all gone horribly wrong.
No, carry on, Amy. It's beautiful.
Yes. Anyway, so that is the beauty though of the Wounded Warriors. I was trying to say is we want to have goodies and baddies. We want it to be simple, and the Wounded Warrior is not simple. And he wants to be a good guy, and he turns himself into a bad guy, and he doesn't know in the end what he's fighting for. And he wants the simple life back. He wants to not have had to be that warrior. He wants not to have had to fight. Um, and it is a story to make people think, and it's a story to make people talk.
I just want to highlight what. Oh, I've lost everybody. Where are you? I've lost you.
What are you looking for?
I've pressed a button and now I can't find you. Oh, there you are. Oh, there you are. It's all right, Simon. I've brought everything back. Yes, I just made you little. Eden says, and if you allude to nuance, it gets seen as an excuse. The worst of the things happening, you're absolutely right. Absolutely right there. So, Wounded Warriors.
Well, I'm afraid, yeah. I mean,
Get a
that's the
dog,
point of
basically.
get
a dog.
Absolutely. I think that's where we can get a dog. Dogs are healing. So here's to dogs and nuance and talking. And keep telling stories because it opens the door for talking and it opens the door to hope.
And I will probably be telling this story as part of First Dog at Ditchling in the spring, if anyone wants to come and hear it.
If you
There
want
will
to
be
know,
camping.
if you want to know more about Shonaleigh's work and where to see her, she does have a website, which is mostly under. If you look under House of the West Wind College of Storytelling, rather than Shonaleigh, isn't it? Really.
It is, but we because we've just become an NOC and approved centre, yay! We're having to rebuild the website, so most things are on my website at the moment, so we can transfer them over.
Which is
Shonaleigh.uk. Yes, that's it.
Shonaleigh.co.uk.
Yes,
Right.
I think it's just .uk.
Okay. If you Google Shonaleigh and storytelling, you will find her. She also has a Facebook page. And if you are interested in hearing this story and many others, so the Drut'syla tradition is a tradition that is passed down from grandmother to granddaughter. Shonaleigh holds thousands of stories in cycles of stories, and she is trying to record those traditions at the moment, record those stories, because a lot of them we don't know about them being anywhere else. And so every evening at 6:30 p.m, well, Tuesdays, Wednesdays and Fridays it is currently 6:30 p.m. UK time, you can hear her for free. If you sign up to Twilight Tales in Facebook, then the link is there. And if you don't do Facebook, you can email me on amythestoryteller@hotmail.com, and I will send you a link. So that is the best place to hear Shonaleigh 3 times a week. I mean, what an amazing opportunity for you all.
It's only half an hour. I don't go on and on and on like this.
Thank you very much to everybody who is here and with us listening live. Thank you to all of you who are listening, time traveling. We're time traveling into the future. So wherever and whenever you are listening, we are very grateful for you for joining with us for this hour, and you are most welcome. If you are listening live, I'm going to stop the recording and you can, in a moment, turn on your cameras and we can carry on the discussion for a little bit longer. If you're listening later and you want to carry on the discussion, then you can make comments on the YouTube site. Please do make comments. Please subscribe and like and all those things, and it helps us be a little bit more visible. And I think both Shonaleigh and I are always up for emails and messages and for carrying on the conversation, because that is what we're both about. We're about telling stories and opening a door for talk and conversation. But for now, I just want to say a massive, massive thank you to Shonaleigh for bringing us the story and the archetype of the Wounded Warrior, and look forward to many more conversations and stories in the future. And on taking the tradition on, next month I will be back with Gary Raji for another conversation. Keep an eye on my webpage, the Patreon site, and the YouTube site for more details. And Shoney's got one more thing she's going to add in.
And also, Gary is doing the House the West Wind Christmas lecture.
And what date's that? Not I bought it. I just bought a ticket, but I can't remember what day it is.
29th of December.
Well, there you go. So there's two opportunities for you to be able to hear Gary Raji in December. She's completely fantastic. We will be telling you far more about both of those events very soon. But for now, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night. Thank you for your company and farewell.